Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, containment. Health officials taking aggressive new action amid the sharp rise in COVID cases, due in part to the rapidly spreading Delta variant. We're live in Las Vegas, where a coronavirus SWAT team is now being deployed to help stop the spread. Plus, President Biden on whether your child could have to wear a mask as they head back to the classroom. The countdown is on. Less than 24 hours from Tokyo's opening ceremony, First Lady Jill Biden arrives in Japan, leading the U.S.'s diplomatic delegation as concerns mount over the rise of COVID cases in the country. A new controversy surrounding the games just a day before the opening ceremony. We'll bring you the latest from the Summer Games. Living their truth, a victory for transgender rights advocates in Arkansas this morning. A federal judge blocks the state's controversial ban on providing crucial gender-affirming care for trans youth. We'll hear from the minors suing the state. And rough waters around the world. A year and a half of lockdowns meant cleaner air and clearer seas. But our return to normal is threatening that environmental progress. We'll take you to the Florida Keys, where the debate on the return of cruise ships is just heating up. There's been quite a bit of debate over cruise ships, in fact.
For various reasons, too.
Yes, exactly. So we bring you that story a little bit later, but we begin with the federal government taking new steps to try to stop the spread of the coronavirus as cases surge across the country. A COVID SWAT team of sorts is heading to Nevada today.
The Southern Nevada Health District reported a worrisome rise in new cases, with the biggest increase in people under the age of 50. NBC News correspondent Heidi Prisbilla joins us now from Las Vegas. So, Heidi, let's talk about this so-called SWAT team. Who are they, and what are they hoping to do?
What is a SWAT team, Joe? It is a compilation of federal officials and staff ranging from the Peace Corps to FEMA, who are coming into cities like this that are experiencing major surges at the request of the governor here in Nevada. Now, today, just behind me, this is a firehouse training center where the local command center will be for this SWAT team. The Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra is coming to tour this location along with the governor. Now, in each state, these SWAT teams, guys, are going to look a little bit different. Here in Nevada, there will be a lot of assistance, for instance, with logistical and technical support. It really depends on the requests of the state. Some of these officials also will be going out, for instance, to grocery stores in areas where they think unvaccinated individuals just need more information.
So Nevada's senators wrote a letter to Secretary Becerra about the state's vaccination rate for nursing home residents, which is actually the lowest in the country. And it's maybe not something we think much about because the older populations have done such a good job of getting vaccinated. How are they hoping to try to fix that in Nevada?
Well, how do you combat a pandemic by treating folks with vaccines if they won't get the vaccines? The answer is you don't. And that's when you get issues like this. Now, the senators are saying they want, number one, answers as to why this is the case, particularly here in Nevada, but they also want some assistance. A lot of these programs that were meant as emergency type programs from the federal government, like the federal pharmacy program going into places like nursing homes, are a little bit winding down. And these senators are saying, you know what, maybe that was premature. Maybe we need to go back into these locations and get more of these individuals vaccinated, because it's not just happening here. We're seeing, for instance, outbreaks at nursing homes in Massachusetts. It's really kind of a return to what happened at the very beginning of the pandemic. This is a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
And Heidi, you're in Clark County. The commission there ruled Tuesday that many employees in Las Vegas are going to have to wear masks again, but the tourists don't. Tell us more about why they made that decision.
Numbers. It's raw numbers. When you look at the vaccination rates here compared to other major cities and states, they're only at about 38% fully vaccinated here. Now, the Biden administration's goal was to get to about 70%. So when you have that, you are, of course, going to have big outbreaks. Now, we're already seeing the numbers here double, triple, just within a matter of weeks. Also, local commissioners warning that hospitals right now are okay, but they are worried again about seeing a situation where they're going to be overwhelmed. And you heard an example, got a flavor and a taste of what they're up against at that commission hearing, guys. When folks got up and talked about masks being unpatriotic, likening them to child abuse, and folks saying, look, all of this can be treated, for instance, perhaps with supplements.
All right, Heidi Prisbilla reporting from hard-hit Vegas. Heidi, thank you.
The Delta variant now makes up the vast majority of new U.S. COVID-19 cases. And now a new study is raising questions about how effective the Johnson & Johnson shot is in fighting the strain. Dr. Bob Lahita joins us now. He's a professor at the Hackensack Meridian School of Medicine and the director of the Institute for Autoimmune and Rheumatic Diseases at St. Joseph's Health. Dr. Bob, we always love when you join us. Good morning. It's good to see you. So that lab study compared Johnson & Johnson to the two-shot vaccines. Now, there have been so many studies and so much conversation about these different types of vaccines, the new warning labels that come with some of them. But this particular study was looking at its effectiveness against the Delta variant. We should note it has not been peer-reviewed, but tell us more about that study and what you make of it.
Okay, so the important thing, Savannah, is to realize that this is a lab study, number one, and number two, it's not peer-reviewed yet. However, from the beginning, the J&J vaccine has always been a lot lower with regard to protection against the Delta variant when compared to Moderna and Pfizer. But it still has significant power, something like 60 to 70% protectiveness when one looks in vivo, that means in the patient, at protection against the Delta variant. So if you got the J&J vaccine, you could get infected, but you will not probably, now I say probably because there's exceptions to every rule, get sick and wind up in the ICU on a ventilator.
Which is really the big thing here, even if you were to contract it again, not get such a serious case. So right now, the CDC is still saying that people do not need booster shots. A lot of the conversation around booster shots had been about those mRNA ones that people were going to essentially need a third. But does this lab study, any of the information here, any of the information about J&J change your mind on the need for a potential booster shot?
No, at this time, Savannah, I don't think we're going to need a booster shot. I think that neutralizing antibody is what everybody's looking at. But again, there's also that thing called cellular immunity, which is very difficult to measure and which we get after the vaccine. The cellular immunity is probably the most powerful part of your immune response. And that is very difficult to measure. And we have that after these vaccines.
All right, Dr. Bob, let's now talk about the other big news this week, which was kids and masks and their return to school. We heard President Biden say last night in this town hall that the CDC will probably recommend that kids under 12 wear masks at school. A reminder, the CDC has not changed its guidance whatsoever on this, but we did hear from this pediatric organization that said that they would recommend it. What would you tell parents with back to school just around the corner? In some places, it's just over a month away. Should kids under 12 be wearing masks every day at school?
Well, the group, Savannah, that said this is the American Academy of Pediatrics. And the American Academy of Pediatrics is much, much more academic and much more directed towards children than the CDC or the WHO or any of the other organizations. They're suggesting, based on the fact that some children, very few, but nevertheless, it's as though it's rare, will get infected with the virus and may even die. And I've seen a couple of cases of that or reports of that recently. So wearing a mask is very important under the age of 12, since you can't get the vaccine yet at that age group. However, try to keep a 5-year-old wearing a mask for more than about 15 minutes. It's almost impossible, and you know that, and the pediatricians know that too. So this is the big dilemma as far as I see it. The good news is that kids don't get very sick when they get infected.
Yeah, I mean, so far anyway, we do have reports coming up in our show about what we're seeing in hospitals right now with younger patients. Dr. Bob, we love having you. Thank you so much. It's great to see you.
We're one day away from the Olympic opening ceremony, and overnight, First Lady Jill Biden landed in Japan. She'll be leading the U.S. diplomatic delegation. We're also learning that the director of tomorrow's opening ceremony has been fired for making a joke about the Holocaust in the past. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Goss joins us now from Tokyo with the latest. Stephanie, good morning. Good to have you with us. Let's start with the First Lady. What's on her schedule before the opening ceremony gets underway?
Hey there, Joe. So she's having dinner tonight with the Prime Minister, Yoshihide Suga, and his wife. Then tomorrow she's going to be having tea with the Prime Minister's wife. She's going to meet the Emperor, as one does in Japan. And then she's going to have a virtual meet and greet with Team USA. Normally, that's the kind of thing that would happen in person. But obviously, because of the COVID restrictions, it's not going to. She's going to be at the opening ceremony. There are only going to be about 1,000 officials at the opening ceremony in that stadium that holds 68,000. But obviously, there are no spectators, and it's going to be empty in there. Joe?
Stephanie, also breaking this morning, as we mentioned, the director of the opening ceremony has been fired. This relates to a joke he made about the Holocaust in 1998. What can you tell us about that and what are organizers saying about it?
Yeah, you know, Joe, this gives you a real window into just how sensitive people in this country are to this event, to these Olympics. It is really wrapped up in everything that's been going on here. But this goes back, as you say, to 1998. This was a joke that was posted on Twitter. The creative director, also a comedian, he made light of the Holocaust. The organizing committee put out a statement saying Kobayashi Kentaro was dismissed from his post after a joke he made in the past about a painful historical event. And then he went on to apologize himself. All of it's very sudden, by the way. I mean, the opening ceremony is in 24 hours. And he says himself, entertainment should not make people feel uncomfortable. I understand that my stupid choice of words at that time was wrong, and I regret it. It's worth noting he's the second creative director for the opening ceremony to lose his job. And there have been a number of kind of high-profile firings in the lead up to these Olympics, and this is really just the latest one, Joe.
And finally, Stephanie, I want to ask you about a change of policy from the International Olympics Committee, which now says it'll allow images of athletes taking a knee in highlight reels and on social media. What more do we know about this decision?
This is a change, Joe. There's something called Charter Rule 50, which bans any kind of political demonstration by athletes at the Olympics. It is a long-standing rule. It's been around for a while. There has been a shift, and I think as the organizing committee saw that there were going to be a number of athletes, soccer players, track and field athletes, protesting during national anthems, that they tried to loosen up the rule just a little bit. But they have not loosened up the podium rule. There will still be penalties for athletes if there's any kind of political demonstration on the medal podium. Joe.
All right. Stephanie Gosk reporting from Tokyo. Stephanie, thanks so much.
President Biden took questions from the public in a town hall last night, touching on a range of issues from the infrastructure bill to the pandemic, warning a new mask mandate could be on the horizon for children under 12 and suggesting that new CDC recommendations could be in place before kids go back to school at the end of the summer.
The CDC is going to say that what we should do is everyone under the age of 12 should probably be wearing a mask in school. That's probably what's going to happen. Secondly, those over the age of 12 who are able to get vaccinated, if you're vaccinated, you shouldn't wear a mask. If you aren't vaccinated, you should be wearing a mask.
NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joins us now to walk us through all the news the president made last night. Monica, good morning. Thanks for being here. So the Washington Post reports the White House has been mulling reinstituting some mask policies as the Delta variant spreads, broadening this out. Let's talk all Americans, both vaccinated and unvaccinated, not just children. What do you think we could see in the future, according to this reporting?
Savannah, I'm told that these conversations have been happening throughout the course of the pandemic, which is that the White House is constantly consulting their health and medical experts to see whether any changes need to be made. And at this time, both the White House and the CDC put out statements on the record saying there is no intention of altering the mask guidance. But again, they're going to rely on the advice of these scientists. So right now, they are still saying if you are fully vaccinated, despite the rapid rise and spread of the Delta variant, you don't need to be wearing a mask. But this is a question that the White House is going to continue to get over and over again. And you did see the president last night in that town hall talk about kids specifically under the age of 12. And that's because, of course, they're not eligible to be vaccinated yet. So the CDC will say that people who aren't vaccinated are the ones who need to be a little bit more careful when it comes to face coverings. The question is, when you have people who are mixed together, vaccinated and unvaccinated, in giant congregate settings, should that guidance change? And that's something that the COVID team is going to be briefing the president on later this afternoon. And there's also going to be a COVID briefing where we hope to press some of these officials about if the situation is changing so dynamically, why shouldn't the guidance change? But again, right now they're pushing back and saying the Washington Post is reporting something that's extremely preliminary in this phase and nothing that at least is going to become real guidance, though we've all seen things can change very, very quickly.
Yeah, certainly. Now let's switch over to infrastructure. So we've kind of got these two plans that are going on right now in Congress, one of them being this bipartisan plan that failed a key vote yesterday. Schumer had set this deadline. It did not actually pass, which is something we were expecting. But now the president is still remaining optimistic. We heard from him after that this infrastructure deal could pass the Senate with hopes for bipartisanship and not just relying on the reconciliation process to pass the bill without Republican support. Why is it that the president is still coming back to that bipartisan hope?
And it was so notable last night, Savannah, because unprompted, the president brought up Ohio Senator Rob Portman. Of course, he was in his own backyard there, and he's a Republican who has been working on the bipartisan framework. And he said, essentially, I take him at his word, and I want to continue these negotiations in good faith. The White House was bracing for that procedural motion to fail yesterday. They believe, though, that by Monday or next week, that this really could be further along. But take a listen to why the president says he does still have that cautious optimism about this coming together from both parties.
And what's going to happen is, I believe, because I take my Republican colleagues at their word when you shake. I come from a tradition in the Senate. You shake your hand, that's it. You keep your word. Remember, the last 4 years, we had infrastructure week every week. We didn't do a thing. But it's necessary. No, I really mean it. It's going to not only increase job opportunities, it's going to increase commerce. It's a good thing, and I think we're going to get done.
Savannah, but there are still questions about what's going to go into that other part, the human infrastructure and the reconciliation bill. So that likely will take place more over the course of the next few weeks. But remember, this was the president's plan all along to pursue these on a two-track path.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Monica, now I want to play some sound of the president head-on addressing conspiracy theories, QAnon, these theories about Democratic lawmakers, but also himself. First, let's listen to that.
I don't care if you think I'm Satan reincarnated. The fact is, you can't look at that television and say, nothing happened on the 6th. You can't listen to people who say this was a peaceful march.
So let's talk through why it's significant that President Biden is directly addressing this kind of rhetoric. What is his strategy here?
A couple of reasons here. What stood out to me, of course, is this came on the heels of the news of the Select Committee yesterday and Kevin McCarthy pulling all of the Republicans who he had appointed to it. Of course, we knew that Speaker Pelosi does have a bipartisan group going forward here because Republican Liz Cheney is a part of that panel. But given the fact that now these other Republicans who he wanted to be a part of it are no longer going to be in that, this was the president also coming out and saying essentially that he's very concerned about that. We've heard all of his comments on January 6th, but also, Savannah, he's very worried about disinformation, given, remember, all his comments about vaccine misinformation and Facebook in the last week or so. That also, to me, jumped out.
All right, Monica, thank you so much.
It's committee chaos on Capitol Hill. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has rejected 2 Republicans picked to serve on the special committee investigating the January 6th attack. She issued a statement saying, with respect for the integrity of the investigation, with an insistence on the truth, and with concern about statements made and actions taken by these members, I must reject the recommendations of Representatives Banks and Jordan to the Select Committee. Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy blasted the Speaker's choice to deny 2 of his 5 picks. He appeared with all of them yesterday and threatened to pull all of his Republican picks for the committee.
This represents something that has not happened in the House before for a Select Committee by the historian. It's an egregious abuse of power. Pelosi has broken this institution.
Never in the history of this institution for a Select Committee, and she admitted to me when she called me, have they ever done something like this?
Unless Speaker Pelosi reverses course and seats all 5 Republicans, we will not participate.
Let's bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell. So, Leanne, we knew Speaker Pelosi had the power to do this. We just didn't know if she would. What more can you tell us about the meltdown surrounding this committee and what members are saying?
Yeah, so, Joe, this was pretty shocking for us who cover Capitol Hill. We know that Speaker Pelosi was considering removing some of these members, but she ended up doing it. And the reason is because it's not about the fact that they voted to overturn the electoral count results on January 6th, but it has to do with other statements that they were making about leading into the election or leading into January 6th. Representative Jordan had met with the former president to talk about undermining the election results. And so those were the reasons. We also caught up with Representative Liz Cheney yesterday, and she had more to say about this. Let's listen.
At every opportunity, the minority leader has attempted to prevent the American people from understanding what happened, to block this investigation. I agree with what the Speaker has done.
Representative Cheney is one of Speaker Pelosi's members on this select committee, and she stands by the Speaker with this. So they are going to continue their work, and their first hearing is scheduled for next Tuesday with rank-and-file Capitol Police and D.C. police officers, Joe.
And it's looking like she may be the only Republican on that committee. Now, Leanne, that's not the only partisan problem right now. The foundation of the infrastructure bill started crumbling in the Senate yesterday. Monica Alba just talked about what happened from the president's perspective. From what you're seeing, is there still hope for a bipartisan compromise there?
There seems to still be hope, even though 10 Republicans, it was what they needed in order to begin debate on this legislation to pass this vote, didn't show up and vote in favor of it. They opposed it. They do say, they put out a statement after that vote saying that they are extremely close. They've been working in good faith, and they expect to have an agreement within the coming days. And so they are encouraging Leader Schumer to bring this vote up again, perhaps early next week, when they say they're going to be done with their work. And so we will see where this goes. I don't think that this was a fatal blow to the bipartisan negotiations, but they still have to come together. And not only that, they have to get the support of 50 Democrats. They have to get the support of at least 10 Republicans. And they still have a lot of work to do, but they still have to finalize those details, Joe.
All right. And Leanne, let's return to last night's town hall with President Biden. He waded back into a debate about Senate rules and the filibuster. Take a look.
Tell you what I'd do. I would go back to that where you have to maintain the floor. You have to stand there and talk and hold the floor. You can't just say,
I understand that.
So what does it tell us that President Biden has been so vocally supporting the talking filibuster in this way?
Well, Biden's agenda is resting in a large part on the filibuster and if it remains. So there's two separate debates. There's eliminating the filibuster, where there's some Democrats who want to do that. And then there's others who are talking about reforming the filibuster. And that's what President Biden was talking about. But the reality is that there's still not 50 Democratic senators in order to change those rules regarding the filibuster. But as things continue to get gummed up in the Senate, those conversations will continue. And it's a very, the reform filibuster faction of the Senate, they now have a powerful ally on their side in President Biden.
All right. Leanne, thank you so much. Coming up, the death toll rises in China from catastrophic flooding after a historic rainfall.
And new COVID restrictions expected for the unvaccinated in Italy. Will take you around the world next. Welcome back. The death toll in China's Henan province now stands at 33 as torrential rain continues to batter the region, causing unprecedented flooding. 12 people died after they were trapped on subway cars by rising waters. NBC News foreign correspondent Janice Mackey-Freyer has more.
Stunning scenes in a subway in central China. Passengers trapped inside flooded train cars, posting horrifying videos to social media. My phone will run out of power soon, she says. The water rising higher, others clinging to handles. It took hours for rescuers to reach them. A dozen people didn't make it out alive. Across the city of Zhengzhou, people were stranded. Kids floated out of a kindergarten in plastic bins. Nearly a year's worth of rain falling in just 3 days, what forecasters called a once-in-a-thousand-years event. The torrential rain has forced 100,000 people to relocate as China's army scrambles to shore up dams now at risk of bursting.
This catastrophic flooding adds to a grim roster of extreme weather across the globe. It's a toll that scientists link to climate change, and there's more rain in the forecast here. Joe, Savannah.
Life could be changing a lot for unvaccinated people in Italy. According to local media reports, the government is expected to announce tough new restrictions on people who have not yet gotten their shot. The government is also reportedly planning to expand the use of its Green Pass, that's a proof of vaccination certificate currently needed for international travel. Of course, we're going to go right to Rome for a response on all this. NBC News foreign correspondent Claudio Lavaga is there. So, Claudio, tell us more. What kind of restrictions could we see put in place for unvaccinated people? Why is the Italian government expected to do this now?
Good morning, Joe. What we expect is some announcement or some confirmation of what you just said by the Prime Minister Mario Draghi in about 4 hours from now. He called for a press conference. That's where we'll learn what kind of restrictions will be introduced. But at least according to speculation to Italian media, in the Italian media, well, we expect the Green Pass, which is, as you said, a proof of people being fully vaccinated here in Italy, to be a requirement for people who want to go in indoor public places such as gyms, swimming pools or theaters or cinemas, or nightclubs, well, you name it, basically every public closed spaces, even indoor seatings in restaurants like the one you're seeing behind me, which is the one bit that is creating a lot of controversy, because of course the restaurant owners and cafe owners are saying that not only that will exclude half of the population, because until now, at least as per today, only 50% of the Italians are fully vaccinated, but also it would be very complicated to get people, to check people before they get into the restaurant whether they've been vaccinated or not and whether they have the Green Pass or not. But we'll see what the Prime Minister says in about 4 hours from now, Joe.
Yeah, so what is the reaction? I mean, you talk about restaurants there, but if there is the potential expansion of the Green Pass to include domestic things, how are folks reacting to that possibility?
Well, I must admit, Italians haven't reacted yet because no announcement has been made yet. But I'll tell you something, that I think they will certainly react if these restrictions will be introduced. And if it's true, as at least according to speculation, that the government will also introduce the requirement of a Green Pass for people who travel domestically, so on domestic flights and on long distance trains. Why? Because this is the start of the holiday season. A lot of people, a lot of Italians have already booked their flights and trains to go on holiday this August. Practically everybody leaves the city for the sea. So if the government introduces this, well, there will be a lot of anger, as we've seen, for instance, happening in France these days, Joe.
Yeah, and I do want to ask you about France real quick. We saw that country roll out its health pass yesterday for places like cinemas and museums. Not everyone is happy. What can you tell us about that?
Well, a lot of people are unhappy. Well, at least 100,000. And that's the number of people who demonstrated in Paris yesterday against the new rules. Well, at the beginning, those rules really worked well because 3.7 million people registered for vaccination right after those rules were announced. But then, of course, that has caused a lot of controversy, a lot of anger among people who will find it very difficult to get a vaccination in time to, do anything really indoors publicly. Well, the government is kind of eased restrictions following that anger, and now they have eased, for instance, the penalty for those who don't abide to the rules or have extended the deadline. So we'll see what happens here in Italy and whether it's the same. The Italians will react the same way as the French. Joe?
All right, Claudio, thanks so much. Let's take a look at what else is making news around the world this morning.
Matt Bodner joins us this morning from Moscow. Good morning, Matt.
Savannah, good morning. Well, let's start here in Russia with a story I can hardly believe myself, but after 15 years of delays, Russia yesterday finally launched this long-awaited science module to the International Space Station. It's been kept on the ground for a long time for basically any problem you can think of at this point, but it's up there now in orbit. Not without issues, though. Russia, after launching it, seemed to have trouble getting telemetry data from it. It's not exactly clear what the situation is now, now, but Roscosmos, the Russian space agency, insists that this module will make its rendezvous with the International Space Station on schedule 8 days from now. We'll keep an eye on that. Moving along now, YouTube has removed videos posted on the channel belonging to Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro that spread information about the COVID-19 pandemic. YouTube is just the latest platform to actually do this. Twitter and Facebook took action against some of his content last year. Bolsonaro frequently uses his platform to kind of cast doubt on the severity of the pandemic and also promote unproven treatments against COVID. Finally now, in the United Arab Emirates, they are trying to use drones to coax just a little bit more rain to fall from the sky, as temperatures there are above 104 degrees Fahrenheit at the moment. The exciting thing is it seems to be working. So these drones fly into the clouds, zap them with some electricity, some electric current. That helps raindrops form. There you have it, rain. This has already been done over Abu Dhabi. And just for reference, the UAE typically sees less than 100 millimeters of rain per year. So I guess every little bit counts.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
I haven't heard of that before.
Me either. I wonder if it's something we could use elsewhere where we're having these drought issues and such here.
Yeah. Somebody tells me there's probably some debate over it too.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, Matt, thank you so much.
We haven't heard. Thanks. Coming up, a year of COVID lockdowns did wonders for our environment. Less people moving around, less pollution.
But now a fierce debate is brewing over the return of cruise ships to the Florida Keys. Got that story next. The Kennedy Center has announced its 44th class of honorees. They are singer-songwriter Joni Mitchell, screen icon Bette Midler, Motown founder Berry Gordy, and opera star Justino Diaz. A well-known figure here at 30 Rock, SNL creator Lorne Michaels is also on the list. The honors recognize artists who've changed American culture. They're scheduled to be presented at a gala on December 5th. Usually airs on television. Always a fun show to watch to see all that. Bette Midler, that'll be cool.
Yeah, very cool. And congrats to our Lorne Michaels. He is certainly a well-known figure among these hallways.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say the show's had an impact on American culture, to say the least.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Well, hopefully that gala can happen on December 5th. Thanks, Joe. Cities around the world saw clearer waters and skies as a result of COVID lockdowns. But with more people going back to work, that trend may be coming to an end. And in Key West, Florida, locals are concerned that the potential return of cruise ships may bring back pollution to the waters. NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman takes a closer look.
After a year of shutdown, life is returning to the Florida Keys, a tropical paradise home to the country's only coral barrier reef. Next to return, pollution and dirtier waters that got cleaner during COVID. Cruise ships used to dock here daily, ferrying nearly 1 million tourists a year. But all that stopped during the pandemic.
These big ships come through and they stir up the bottom and they kick up big plumes of mud and silt and sediment into the water. I grew up down here. I'm 43 years old. We were seeing clearer, more consistently clear waters than I've seen since I was a kid down here.
Locals noticed it, and now science backs it up. Researchers at Florida International University have been monitoring water quality around the Keys for 25 years. They found that turbidity, a fancy word for water cloudiness, was significantly lower during COVID than normal. You can see it in these satellite images from before COVID and after. Around the world, less human activity meant less pollution during COVID. Water quality in the San Francisco Bay and the Long Island Sound improved. In Venice, aquatic life spotted in the famously dirty canals that hasn't been seen there in decades. Less nitrogen oxide in the air in New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. But it may not last. This week, the International Energy Agency said as the economy recovers, global greenhouse gas emissions are on track to surge to all-time highs by 2023. I wanted to find out exactly what's happening in the blue-green waters off Florida's iconic coast. So I boarded this 42-foot catamaran with researchers from the College of the Florida Keys.
Water quality is probably one of, if not the most important components in a healthy reef ecosystem. We have, especially on the Florida reef tract, seen a steady decline in the health of the reef. It could be that cruise ships are detrimental to the environment. It could be that cruise ships have no effect. We don't know. We're going to collect that data, and we're not making any inferences before we've got that data in our pocket.
Today, scientific scuba divers are plunging to the ocean floor to deploy new devices inside the cruise ship channel.
We took our water sample from the bottom too, right? So now I'm going to test the water sample for hydrogen sulfide. I'm going to test it for pH, and I'm going to test it for ammonia, and record all that information so that we have what's called baseline data on the way the water is now.
That way, scientists can establish cause and effect.
Great, cool. Let's go get some chemistry.
All right. On board the catamaran, researchers analyzing water samples we've taken throughout the journey, testing them for key indicators of water quality: dissolved oxygen, hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, and salinity.
Water sample.
Back on shore, a fierce debate is raging over whether to let the cruise ships return.
If the ships come back, it would be a water quality disaster for the Florida Keys.
Last year, Key West voters passed a referendum banning large cruise ships from coming here. But the Republican-controlled Florida legislature passed a law saying voters can't do that, clearing the way for cruise ships to return. Now Key West's city commissioners are debating whether they should step in, even as some locals say the ships should return.
In my business, the cruise ships account for about 70% of the people that I get and about 60% of the revenue.
For the last decade, Christopher Ellis and his wife have run Key Lime bike tours, hiring guides to show visitors the best of Key West's history and culture. But with cruise ship traffic all dried up,
I actually laid off my entire staff. I said, you can work through November, but starting in December, I'm going to do all the tours myself because I can't afford this.
There's no question that tourism is the lifeblood of this oceanside town. But Florida's coral reef has been dying off for years due to human activity, creating tough choices about what the future should look like as America reopens.
And here in Key West, they still don't know exactly how this fight is going to play out. In other parts of the country, cruise ships are already starting to sail. But here in Key West, they have managed to hold it off for now. We'll have to see how long that'll last. Joe, Savannah?
Coming up, a win for trans rights advocates in Arkansas.
A federal judge's ruling on the state's controversial ban on gender-affirming care up next.
A federal judge has temporarily blocked an Arkansas law that bans gender-affirming care for transgender minors. That law was set to go into effect next week. It would have prevented doctors from providing transition-related care like hormones and puberty blockers to trans children. The ACLU filed a lawsuit on behalf of 4 trans youth and their parents challenging the law. I spoke with those families last month for our NBC News Now special, Trans America. Dylan, I want to start by asking you. I know you've been on testosterone for a little less than a year now. If this new law in Arkansas goes into effect, how's that going to impact you?
It could impact me in so many different ways. Since starting on my gender-affirming care, my confidence and happiness and overall mental health well-being has just shot up, and I'm doing so much better, so that it could impact that a lot.
Yesterday, a federal judge issued a temporary injunction against the law, saying that pulling this care midstream from trans minors would cause irreparable harm. Just one of many pieces of controversial legislation making headlines across the country. This year alone, more than 100 bills impacting the transgender community have been introduced in over 30 states. NBC Out reporter Joe Yerkeba joins us now. They were with us for that Pride Month special and join us again. Joe, what more can you tell us about the judge's ruling in Arkansas and the reaction to it?
Yeah, so the judge ruled to grant the ACLU a preliminary injunction, which is just a temporary stay on the law taking effect. The ACLU had argued that allowing it to take effect would have irreparable harm on trans youth, particularly those in the state who are already receiving this care and who would have lost it once the law took effect, and those who might need the care in the coming months. So the judges appeared to agree with that argument, and the ACLU and the plaintiffs, they know that they'll still have to take this battle to court, but they're counting this as a win for right now.
And Joe, if this law had gone into effect next week, how might it have impacted families and trans kids?
Families say it would have a devastating impact. You can take a listen to Sabrina Jenin here, a 15-year-old trans girl who's living in Arkansas.
It would take me back to a time before I really came out. It was really depressing and things just didn't seem worth it anymore.
So trans young people in the state have said that, it would take them back to when they had mental health issues. It would increase their risk of, suicidal ideation. So the impact would have been devastating.
And Joe, you probably remember when I asked those 4 families, if this law goes into effect, how many would consider moving? All 4 families raised their hands saying that if this goes into effect, they're probably going to have to move out of Arkansas to another state. We should know this isn't over yet. So I guess I want to ask you, what's next? How is the state responding to this ruling? And is the Arkansas Attorney General ready to fight this further in court?
Right. Yeah. So now the case will go to trial, and Arkansas Attorney General Leslie Rutledge has said that they are planning to fight it in court. Last NBC News received a statement a few months ago, and the ACLU filed the suit. And Rutledge said that they plan to aggressively defend Arkansas's law, which strongly limits permanent life-altering sex changes to adolescents. And Rutledge said that they wouldn't sit by idly while radical groups such as the ACLU use our children as pawns for their social agenda. So they definitely plan to aggressively defend the law.
And a reminder that Arkansas's governor actually vetoed this, but lawmakers then overrode that veto. Joe Urqueva, as always, thank you for your reporting on this important topic. Appreciate it.
Time now for our CNBC Money Minute, the biggest financial headlines of the day and why they matter to you.
CNBC's Bertha Coombs is with us. Hey, Bertha, good morning.
Hey, Joe and Savannah, if you're in the market for a car, this news matters to you. General Motors is cutting production of some pickup trucks in North America due to the ongoing global computer chip shortage. Next week, it will close factories in Indiana and another in Mexico that make the Chevy Silverado and the GMC Sierra, both big money makers. Another plant in Michigan is going to go down to just 1 shift instead of 3. GM expects the factories to resume regular production in the first week of August. Meantime, Elon Musk says Tesla could play a big role in helping the world transition to renewable energy, but it's currently limited by tight supplies of battery cells. Musk was speaking yesterday at a Bitcoin and cryptocurrency conference in a panel that included Twitter and Square CEO Jack Dorsey. He also got a bit reflective, saying Tesla's entire reason for existence is boosting clean energy, and the company is probably responsible for 2/3 of all his personal and professional pain. Meantime, cryptocurrencies are getting a boost from Musk's comments during those sessions yesterday. He disclosed that SpaceX owns Bitcoin on its balance sheet. He also says Tesla will most likely resume accepting Bitcoin as payment for cars once it becomes more environmentally friendly to produce. Musk says that he personally owns Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Dogecoin, while Tesla and SpaceX are also investors and will remain that way. And he says he may pump it up, but he does not dump it. He says he is holding on to his cryptocurrencies. So even as he talks it up, he's not selling to lock in a profit.
Oh, well, that probably means there will be more cryptocurrency news that we don't really get.
We'll figure it out someday.
We're happy to have it because other people get it.
Smile and nod. All right, thank you, Bertha.
Coming up, the effects of climate change are on full display, grabbing headline after headline.
And now that's prompting a response from Republicans on the Hill. We're going to explain next. Utah Representative John Curtis launched the Conservative Climate Caucus to give a home to Republicans who believe in combating climate change and educating others on the global threat.
And NBC News reporter Julie Sirkin went to the Beehive State to learn more about it.
So when we say climate, what does it mean to you?
Oh, it means everything. It means our future, our kids' future, our health.
Would you consider yourself a Republican?
I would.
Climate change is front and center in rural red Utah, and Congressman John Curtis is challenging Republicans in Washington to confront the issue.
Today, I'm proud to launch with my Republican colleagues the Conservative Climate Caucus. All I know is we can do our part, right? And we can see what difference we can make to the conversation. But I think it's a very important part of the conversation that's been missing.
Curtis launched the first ever climate caucus to educate conservatives and bring them into the conversation before it's too late. About a third of all Republicans in the House have already joined. They had to sign on to core principles acknowledging the climate is changing and that the global industrial era has contributed to that change. Something that's been obvious to scientists, but has been difficult to admit in an increasingly partisan environment.
120-degree temperatures in BC.
Yeah.
The only way that can happen is with some really weird climate change going on.
Have you followed what we're doing?
Well, I saw the article in the Herald about that. Yeah, and I'm so proud of you.
It's good to see you. Was that your dog that just visited?
Today in Utah, the effects of climate change are on display. Extreme heat, a severe drought shrinking the Great Salt Lake, and smoke from wildfires burning even in other states, polluting the air, all threatening this stunning landscape.
People who don't have this in their backyard, why should they care and pay attention to climate change?
I think everyone has something around them that shows signs of the climate changing, and that's why it's a global problem.
Seeing is believing for the next generation. The median age in the largely Mormon district is 26, and the majority are conservative.
I think people recognize that, hey, if you want to be part of the future of America, you've got to address this real concern. And I do think that young people, those going through college, high school,
We spoke to some of them, BYU students.
I mean, they know this is a real issue. For me, this is one of the three major issues that our society faces over the next couple of decades. Failure to address it would be a failure that we would not be proud of having part of our own legacy.
This is one of the youngest districts in the country, and it's also one of the reddest districts in the country. So can you talk to me a little bit about what climate change means to your generation, and especially to the conservative young generation? Maggie?
Yeah, I'd say for millennials and Gen Z, climate change isn't really a partisan issue. It's pretty straightforward that we want to take better care of the environment.
Young Republicans from BYU are passionate about their faith and say it's more important to be, quote, good stewards of this earth. As for the Republican caucus,
it's just the first step. And if it were to just end with, hey, now we have a group of Republicans who are open to talking about climate change, that wouldn't meet the expectations that our generation has for our elected leaders. But with that said, he's taking that first step.
Do you think those conversations are enough?
It's not enough. Conversations are a great starting point and they need to be had, but solutions need to be made.
How do you think we address this issue, both from an economic standpoint and from an environmental standpoint?
And I think the best way we can come together on the political spectrum to address climate change is carbon pricing, is putting a price on carbon and returning 100% of that in a form of a monthly check, a dividend.
It does show that.
Curtis often meets with scientists to educate himself on climate issues. One of those experts, Logan Mitchell, a professor of atmospheric sciences at the University of Utah.
This pond and this whole park is a really iconic area of Salt Lake. Over the last few decades, as the climate has shifted, the pond no longer freezes.
And of course, it's not just in Utah. The effects of climate change have accelerated worldwide in the last few decades.
I'm immersed in this research, and I knew these impacts were coming, but I thought we'd have another decade or two before we'd start seeing, the scale of the wildfires we are, to some of the drought conditions that we're seeing. All of these changes are happening much faster than even I expected, and I think that's true of a lot of the scientific communities.
The largest saltwater lake in the Western Hemisphere, drying up, with conditions worrying residents, tourists, and conservationists alike.
Activists say the clock is ticking on climate change and action needs to have happened yesterday.
We definitely need to be working toward renewable energy standards, holding industry accountable, investing in public transit, and really making these actions today.
Congressman Curtis not necessarily sold on those ideas. He believes in meeting Republicans where they're at.
We don't like the Green Deal deal. You're not surprised that we don't like that. But what do we like? We haven't really articulated, but there's a lot of ideas that fit right in with conservative values.
What are those? A carbon tax? Not quite. Focusing on private sector innovation and the free market to reduce emissions is where the caucus can agree. There are no specific policy proposals just yet, but there is a lot at stake.
I've got 25 grandkids, and I'm real concerned about the nature of America when they become adult. And so I want to make sure that we're addressing the major challenges we face, and certainly climate change is one of those.
And I actually think we're off track as a nation, and that this conservative climate caucus can help put us back on track.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.